Makes it more exciting. So good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. And for those who are joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. Right now, we're joined by 4 classes from across North America. We might get a few more. And so I want to give them a chance to do a bit of a shout out before we start. So without a video, but certainly there in spirit, we've got Miss Vischer's grade 4 class in Chilliwack, British Columbia. Hi, guys.
Hi!
Awesome. We've got Miss Oster's grade 4s in Thompson, Manitoba.
Hi!
We've got and just joining us a second ago, we have Cape Henry Collegiate, I think in Virginia Beach, Virginia. That you guys? Yes? Maybe? Yes, it is. Good. All right. You guys are going to need to demute your own mic later, but we'll get to that in a while. All right. We are joined today, the reason we're all here today, we are joined live at UC Berkeley by Dr. Ari Martinez. He is a bird ecologist, so he has traveled all over South and Central America in pursuit of some of the most beautiful and amazing creatures in the world. He's very fond of outreach, and he's joining us today for his very first Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants hangout. Without further ado, thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Ari.
Ari,
Sorry.
That's okay. It's okay. Great.
Take it away.
Okay, great. Hey, everyone. Hi out there. Really excited to share with all of you some of the work I do, and I'm totally excited to hear if you have any questions about the work and about how it goes. So without further ado, I was born in Los Angeles, California, and I grew up in the city, and I had all my experience was literally growing up in the city next to the LA River Channel. So I didn't really have a lot of experience in nature. And it wasn't until until about high school when I had a chance to go camping, I really realized how much I really loved the outdoors. And it was a way of realizing that was something that was really exciting to me, was being outside and learning about things outside. And by the time I got in college, I got more excited about science and by doing things outdoors. So doing work in ecology and working with organisms in their environment, with birds and fish and amphibians. And it was really exciting. And from there, I ended up traveling a lot and getting opportunities in college to do research experience as a student, which eventually led me to go to graduate school and then get more training and then become what is getting a doctoral degree. And so now I'm going to have a position in a university as a professor. But what's great about it is I still get to go out and go to exciting places and ask questions. And what I love about my job is that it's incredibly creative. I get to meet up with different people who have different kinds of passions, and we ask questions about nature, and then we go out there and we measure things to answer these questions. So it's really all about curiosity driving what we want to do. Like the curiosity drives us to find out things about our natural world, which drives us to be out there and measure different things. And it's really, really fun. So what I'm interested in is I work in the tropics, as Jesse has mentioned to you. And what I do is I'm really interested in understanding some of the behaviors of birds and how it explains why different species of birds hang out together and how that might explain some of the patterns in biodiversity that we see. So we do a lot. So when I say we, it's a lot of my work, but anytime a scientist does work, we share and we collaborate with other people, and that is hugely important. So it's always a team of people that does something, and so it's a lot of work by a lot of different people. And so what we do is we go down and we use a lot of different types of techniques to find out what kinds of birds are in the forest, because there's so many species, you just can't use one type of method to see or hear what's there. And so I'm going to share with you some of the work we do in some of the remotest parts of South America, and then talk about some of the specific things a little bit about what we do. Okay, so I'm going to screen share now, and we're going to travel to South America. We're going to travel to Manu National Park, which is one of the most remotest parks in South America, and it's in southeastern Peru. So let's take a look at that. And Jesse, you just let me know if things are working or not. And let's see. So we're going to start here.
We're good.
Okay, here we are, everyone. And if we look where the cursor is, shout out, Jesse, if this is okay. But everyone is here, right, in Canada and in the United States. And we're going to travel all the way down to Peru, right, to this part of Peru. And so here's a magnification of Peru. And if we magnify further, we're in the southeastern part of the country. And this is Manu National Park. So some of you may have heard of Cusco, which is an ancient city of the Inca Empire, which is now a modern place where a lot of tourists go because it's an amazing city, has a lot of history. And if you look at all these crinkled lines, you can see that it's in the Andes mountain range. So what we have to do is we have to cross the Andes, drop down into the lowlands of the tropics. So we go from really cold areas to really warm areas, and we travel by boat upriver into the deepest parts of Manu National Park. So this park, let's get a closer look at it, right? So here we have Cusco, which I showed you, right? We cross up this road here. This red line is a road, and we drive all day. It takes like 10 hours. And then we get down to this river port. We sleep there the night in a little town called Atalaya. And from this town, we travel all the way down this river, which is the Alto Madre de Dios. And then from this river, we spend the night, another night here in Bocamanu, and then we have to go to the health post and make sure we have flu shots. And the reason we have to be vaccinated is because when we go into the national park, there are uncontacted tribes that have never, tribes of people that live in the forest that have never had contact with people from modern day society. And so to protect them and to make sure they have no resistance to things like the flu, they have to check us to make sure we get flu shots. And then we travel all the way upriver to here to Cochacashu. This is one day down here and another day up, right? So to give you a sense, like all this is the national park, and it looks trivial, but look, if you look from the air, this is what you're looking at. Hundreds of kilometers of intact rainforest, right? And to get into the deepest parts of that park, we are literally going up these rivers. See these meandering rivers? We have to travel all through these rivers, this river, which is the Manu River, and it takes all day because it's really low water in the dry season. And so here's an example, right? Here's the little boat that we take, and hopefully this works. And you can see from the air, you can see how slow this boat goes. I guess the video is not playing very well, but you can see, I can just do it along like this maybe, and then you can see how small that boat is, and it just has to go all the way up. I guess the video is not playing very well. But anyway, that little thing here, that's the little boat, and it goes all the way meandering up and around these rivers. And then eventually we get to a station, for instance. Here's Cochacashu Station. Here's the station where we stay while we're sampling all throughout this forest, yeah? Now, the crazy thing is that I remember if I told you, when I was telling all of you, is that it takes a lot of different types of techniques to find out what kinds of birds are in the forest. And so one of the things, for instance, we have a lot of crew, we have a big crew, and one of the techniques we use, for instance, is what's called mist netting, where we put up mist nets, okay? And I'm just gonna give you an overview of the types of techniques we use to find out the birds that are there and how we can sample them, and then I'll tell you about some of the questions that we're interested in, okay? So here, for instance, we set up mist nets. Here's Renato, he's from Peru, and he's setting up this mist net. Here's a pole, and here's this really fine scale net. But then you have to open the nets really early in the morning. You see that he has his headlamp on because it's like 5:30 in the morning, and these are all vines, and he sets up these nets, and while he's setting up the net, someone else is in the dark setting up all the different types of tools that we're going to use to measure the birds. Here's like a scale to weigh the birds. We have a caliper in here to measure the bill length of the birds, and we have a ruler to measure the wing length of the birds. And so then once the nets are set up, the birds get caught in the nets, some of these birds, yeah? And then you have people that go through and they gently pull out the birds, and they take them out of the nets every like half hour, for instance. And here, all these net bags, each of these bird bags has a bird in it. So Blaine is going through, and all these different net surveyors are taking the birds out of the nets. And then once they take the birds out of the nets, they can then like go to this little station that we had set up early in the morning, and people can measure with the calipers. They can measure their bill length, for instance. That's what Katerina's doing right here, and that's what Stephanie's doing. And you see they have their headlamps on. They have their headlamps on because we started sampling really early in the morning, and you just forget and you leave it on because it's already like 6 in the morning here. And so everyone's got their little task about the types of things they measure. So here, for instance, it looks funny, but you stick a bird in a little tube and it's totally fine. It immobilizes it so we can weigh it properly on a digital scale and get its body weight. And then here, for instance, you can see that they're holding out the leg and they're putting on a metal band. And so you can put on a metal band so that if we recapture the bird, we can see where it's moved. And if we do this in subsequent years, we can see how long these birds live. And then, for instance, the other thing is we can see here we've got color bands, which are really important because here, these folks can then look and watch the birds in the field where specific birds are and like see where their territories are and who they're interacting with, what other birds. Is this bird going to interact with this bird all on a consistent basis, these two individuals? Well, we know now because these birds have color bands, so we can see if they're staying in these permanent groups, for example. So Meredith and Chelsea are experts at doing this. They're really good at finding birds in the forest. So when we do that, right, we can catch some of these birds up close, and you can see some of the types of birds we get. Here's a puff bird. This is a very quiet bird that hardly ever calls. Here is black-faced tanager. Sorry, I only remember the scientific names usually. So this is Tanager schranki. That's the scientific names. Usually we only use scientific names. So sometimes I can't remember what the English names are. And then here, for instance, is a mannequin. This is a male mannequin. This is a band-tailed mannequin, and here is a collared trogon, okay? And so then, of course, sometimes you get really special things in nets. You get two canets, right? Here's arasaris, yeah, and so these are lettered arasaris. You got a male and a female that we got at the same time. But the thing is that nets can only sometimes catch some birds in the forest in the understory. So what do? Because the forest is up to 30 meters tall for those of you who are in Canada, so about 34 yards tall for those of you in the US, but we try to use metric if we can. And so what do? Sometimes what we do when we can't capture birds in nets, because that's only one way to sample a very small group, we have to walk through we have to go, for instance, to the river. And this way we can count parrots. Here I am in the middle of the river in low water. And what I do is I wait at the late afternoons and I watch the groups of parrots as they fly over, or the groups of blackbirds, sometimes called oropendulas or caciques. And I can count the numbers in the groups and see how many groups come over, because sometimes they're always in the canopy and you can't hear them. And then, of course, one of the main things we do is we walk through the trail. Here I am, and I have my data notebook. And I'm watching and listening for all the birds in the forest, right? So this is a more comprehensive technique because you can only, like I said, when using mist nets, you can only capture a certain amount of birds doing that. Here I'm walking through the forest and I'm registering everything I hear and I see, and I try and estimate where they are, because you can't see it here in the forest, but this forest is on a grid and we have stakes. So we can actually locate the position so that we could eventually decide whether certain individuals or certain species are always in the same spots. And therefore we could find out how many of these individuals are in a certain area, right? So that gives us an idea of how many there are in a certain area. And so sometimes we see, here's a chestnut-capped puffbird, for instance, when we're walking through the forest, right? These are some of the birds you can see. Or you can see birds close to the ground. This is Phlegopsis nigromaculata. Sorry, this is an obligate ant bird. This bird usually follows army ants. And then here again, here is a black-fronted nunbird. And this bird is usually in the mid-story of the forest, so not on the ground and not in the canopy, but in the middle. And then I'll get back to this guy in a little bit later. And then, of course, here's that trogon again, okay? And these are some really common birds. Now, here are some of the birds we see. But if you remember what I said, like if we go back up like here, look at, what do you guys notice about this? What do all of you notice about this? It's really dense. So when we're censusing for birds and we're studying them, a lot of time, most of the time, we're actually detecting the birds and identifying them by their vocalizations, by their calls and their songs, because it's so hard to see a lot of the birds in the forest. So while it's great that once in a while we see them, the diversity of sound is really something special. And It's the sound of the birds that really can tell us, the unique calls tells us what birds are where. So I'm going to play for you guys, for all of you, sorry, some of you, what some of these birds sound like, because I've showed all of you how different they are visually, right? And there's lots of different kinds of beautiful birds in terms of their plumages. But listen how diverse they are, and listen to the diversity of sound, okay? This is a potu. Okay, kind of an eerie sound. That bird typically is a nocturnal bird because often we census those birds by walking around at night on the same trails. Here is a musician's rend, and and it has a name that has its name for a reason. Okay, and so I have field assistants for the first time when they come with me, and we're walking through the forest, and sometimes they'll say, hey, someone's singing in the forest. I'm like, no, that's the musician wren. It's a bird, it just always sounds happy, right? It's always singing through. And here's a bird called the crested cacique, and they form these colonies they build these breeding colonies, and that they're very social. They hang out, they're always in groups. Okay. Okay, so that's the crested cacique. Now here, this is a capuchin bird. This bird's very in actually French Guiana, but just to give you a sense. Right, pretty unique call. So I'll do that, and then let's go to this. Here is a bird called a wood creeper. This bird, if you look at its bill, you see this bird it's like woodpeckers, right? All of you probably familiar with a woodpecker. Woodpeckers drill into the bark and get insects from the inside of the tree. But these birds, these wood creepers, they crawl up tree trunks just like woodpeckers, but they pry off the flakes of the bark on a tree, and that's where they get their insects from, just the outsides of the bark. So let's listen to this bird. Okay, and here is a bird called a Lawrence's thrush, and this bird imitates all the other birds of the forest, and it can imitate even things. I don't have a good recording of it, but it can even imitate crickets, and it can imitate frogs. So when I'm actually going through and we're doing actual counts, sometimes we'll hear these birds, and then we'll realize it's a Lawrence's thrush mimicking other birds. It's kind of crazy. Now here's a bird. Not sure why this isn't showing up. I don't know if you can see the picture or not, but here's an ant trike. So to almost see that rattle, it's very easy to find this bird. And this bird is really important. I guess I'm not sure if it's showing up the picture. I hope the picture's showing up for you. But this ant trike, and then this bird here, this is a nun bird. These last two birds are birds that give alarm calls that are very prominent in the forest. So one thing is to know all the birds that are there and how many there are. But the other thing that we're really interested in is how do these species interact with each other? That's one of the main things we want to know, because it's knowing something about the interactions that helps us understand how biodiversity is maintained, because understanding interactions among species can really help inform us about, are there certain species that are really important in influencing why certain species are in certain places. So this bird and this last bird, gosh, I guess that picture's not showing up. For instance, these birds give alarm calls to raptors that fly through. So there's a lot of, everyone's afraid of getting eaten, right, by hawks and falcons. And so these birds give alarm calls, and when they give alarm calls, all the other birds know those alarm calls and they dive and freeze, right? So here, for instance, I hope this works, you guys, everyone. This isn't showing up for some reason now. I don't know why. But these birds dive and freeze in the forest, and this isn't loading. Bummer. Okay, and so what you can get from this is that the birds, you can see who reacts to who. So what we're interested in a more specific question is, who is listening to who? Because are there certain birds that are really, really important in terms of being key players in terms of providing information for other bird species in the forest? And are they really important for allowing species to be in certain places and certain times? In other words, are they kind of influencing kind of the habitat? And then this just froze on me, my PowerPoint, which is kind of a bummer. But that's where we are for now. And I'm gonna have to stop that, I guess, because my computer just froze. Are you still with me?
I can still hear you. Yeah, you're good. It's just your PowerPoint is frozen.
Okay. Did the pictures come through?
All the pictures up till this last one came through. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So the answer. Okay. So this one isn't showing up because this is the video. Maybe I can stop it and restart it.
Try.
Okay. Let's do that. Okay. Hold on. So bear with me, everyone. I'm gonna try and. PowerPoint is not behaving right now, so. Let's try this again, and then start it up.
Okay. That's okay.
All right. I'm not getting, let's see, so. I have to share again, yeah? Okay, so let's try sharing again. Start screen share. Okay, are we good?
Hey, we got the answer right now. We can see it.
Okay, did you see this bird before?
I don't think so. No, it was the one that wasn't showing up. So we.
Okay, all right, everyone. So here's the ant trike. This is one of those alarm calling birds. So that's a really, see, that rattles a very distinctive sound. So whenever you hear that, we know there's an ant track and we can go follow it. Now, remember I was telling you that these birds are alarm calling birds. And so here, for instance, I'm going to play this. Okay, you can see this now. Hopefully this works. So right here in the middle is one of these little birds that follows the ant trikes a lot. And we're going to try and play, this is when we did an alarm call from this bird here. We played this bird's alarm to this bird, and let's see what happens. Let's see if it dies or freezes. The bird's right there, so try and follow it. Hopefully this works. Boom. You see how that bird just flew right down? So it's a key player. Like, that's why these birds, and normally this type of vegetation is very dangerous for birds. That's the hypothesis, because a lot of raptors can come through and take a bird right off that branch because they're very agile, hawks and falcons. And so a lot of birds are listening to other birds in the forest. So remember when I said that one of the things we want to know about the diversity of birds in the forest is who listens to who. Well, it's just not birds, yeah? So let's look at this guy. Here is a tamarin. This is a type of monkey. This is a Ciguinus fusicalis. It's a saddleback tamarin. Let's see what it does to the bird alarm. Wow, see? just dove right down in the forest. So these are networks of information where everyone, it seems like a lot of things are listening to other things in the forest, and we want to know, are there certain role players, again, that are really important? So one thing is to describe all the species that are there with all the techniques we have. But then another aspect of that, of course, is understanding why all these species are hanging out together. What are the biotic interactions that allow them to be together? And so what we're trying to do is when you figure out why information about like alarms, who are the major role players. So that's kind of some of the stuff we want to address with our research. Now, I showed you one field site, but we go to lots of different places in South America. And one thing when you're doing research and you're traveling around, you have to be adaptable. So sometimes you have a comfortable boat like I showed you before, but other times, like for instance, going to this part of South America where this yellow dot is, this is northern Peru, we have to take these big barges, and then from these big barges, we get on these little peques, for instance, and then we go upriver, and this is a community, to get to one of our field sites. And sometimes when you get on one of these barges, there's no room to hang out, so sometimes this is where we slept that night on coming back. When we ended our trip, we slept on the deck, or sometimes we sleep in tents, and then sometimes the trees fall on the tents, which is kind of a bummer. And then, of course, sometimes here's in northern South America, where we sleep in hammocks that are covered by mosquito nets, and sometimes you either have to take a helicopter to get there or a small boat. And then other times, if you have a low budget, you can take these logging trucks down, and you sit in the truck with a bunch of goods that all these trucks come down the road from where I was telling you, from Cusco, and sometimes they come down and they bring all kinds of supplies to all the communities. Well, because they're huge and they bring all kinds of supplies, we can load up all our gear, and we can sit on top of all the stuff. There's a big thing of toilet paper that's being delivered to a community, for instance, and then all the crew you find your comfortable spot on top of a packet of whatever it is, Coke and toilet paper right here, or I don't know. So there's Coke bottles, and you kind of wedge yourself in, and you spend the night going down this truck, depending on your budget. And then in the morning, you open this up, and look at, lo and behold, you're in the rainforest. And sometimes we're sleeping in tents. And so there's all different types of conditions that we're in, and we eat anywhere we want. So sometimes we eat here on the fourth floor, on a bridge, and see there's different places when we're taking a break within the forest. But the main thing I wanted to show you is that I think I've showed you that there's lots of different types of people that it takes to make a project work. And for instance, this last project, here's all the people that we did with that were in our project, and some of them are down there still. And there are people from Peru, there's people from Chile, there's people from the United States, and there's people from there's men and women and men from all different types of backgrounds and different ages to make a project work. And so you can see there's an incredible amount of diversity of people that can really make a project a really exciting and productive kind of rewarding kind of experience, and it can really make a project much better. And so and that's a really important aspect, is collaborating and sharing ideas amongst different people and working together. And I think that's really important. So I don't know how much time I've taken up, but I think that's kind of what I wanted to present with you in terms of some of the different types of techniques and some of the challenges we have to explore the diversity of birds in a rainforest, and then they delve into like some of the questions that we're trying to address with all these different types of birds with their diverse sounds. And so with that, I think I'd like to leave it at that and maybe open it up to questions. Or would you like me to explain some more stuff?
No, that's perfect, actually. It's about 30 minutes. That's exactly what we look for here, so that's awesome.
Okay, great.
So yeah, so thank you so much, Ari. That was wonderful. We will go to the first class. So Miss Vischer's class, if you guys have a question, come on up. I know we can't see you, but we can hear you.
What's your question, Lauren?
I studied Peru.
Yeah, Lauren, that is a statement. Does anybody have a question? What's your question, Dallas?
Why do you have ocean? Why do you just hike?
He's wondering why you take boats. Why can't you just hike?
Oh, because there are no roads to go into the national park to the point where we're going. It's only rivers. That's the only way to get there.
Cool. Good question. Good answer. 2 quick notes. So Ari, if you want to exit screen share, we'll actually see you again when you answer. Perfect.
Right.
Also, groups watching online live. I know Ms. Beckett's group from Paris, Ontario is set to watch, among others. If you guys want to pass on questions in the chat bar on the right of YouTube, I can pass them to Ari, so please do that. But for now, let's go to Ms. Oster's class.
Did I exit screen share?
Yeah, you're good, Ari. Yeah.
Okay, great.
A bird.
So what was the question
again? What's your favorite bird?
Favorite bird.
I can't hear it again.
What's your favorite bird?
Oh, I think my favorite bird is it's hard to say because I think there's so many different species and they do so many different things. The different species, when in their interactions, have their special moments. So I can't necessarily say that there's any specific bird, but the ant shrike, it's really awesome to watch this bird interact and flock with other birds because it's really agile and it has all these vocalizations. And so it just makes you wonder what all these different vocalizations mean. And it actually sometimes steals food from other birds and is underneath them. And so it's so alert in doing so many different things. I'd have to say it's one of the more interesting birds that I've observed to this point.
Very cool. Awesome. All right, let's go to Ms. Lee's class. You guys have a question?
Hi, my name is Nargis.
My name is Nargis, and my question is like, how exactly do you create the nets?
Yeah. So the nets are pre-made by a company. And so when we get them, they're in little bundles, and then we can just splay them out. But we do have to repair them sometimes. So to repair them, there's special thread, just like thread for repairing your clothes. And sometimes we have to repair the nets. But we actually don't have to make the nets. They're already made. They're fine mesh, very fine little threads that are splayed out into a 9-meter long net or 9-yard long net.
Very cool.
Great question.
Great question. Question from online. So I know you detailed a lot of birds in your presentation, but is there something generally that they eat? Are they seed eaters? Are they eating worms?
Oh, yeah. So they eat all kinds of things. Most of the ones I showed you eat insects. Okay. Yeah. But there are birds that eat insects. There are birds that eat fruit. There are birds that eat seeds. So, yeah, there's lots of different stuff. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Let's go to Miss Williams' group. You guys have a question?
Hi. We would like to know if the birds are experiencing any problems like deforestation, and even though it is a national park, what are some problems that they are experiencing?
Right. So, well, we're in the middle of the national park, so there are no human impacts where we're at. There are other places where we have the same types of species where there's lots of forest fragmentation, and a lot of work's been done looking at the effects of fragmentation and the effects of actually in the eastern Amazon, the effects of drought, which have actually caused instances of fire, which pretty much changes the bird communities quite drastically. And then, you know, long term, what we'd like to do is have more long-term data over numbers of years to match up with climate data to see if we're seeing differences that might be driven by climate. There is a little bit of evidence that's showing that certain climate changes and maybe short-term climate changes may cause declines in certain species, but we're not sure. In our area, we just don't know yet. And but we do see some drastic changes that may be due just to changes along the river, because the plot that we work on part of it is next to the river, but we are seeing certain changes in species, but we don't know if those changes are natural or whether there's any kind of human driven kind of changes that have caused that. Great question.
Two quick notes too for the classes that might be interested in birds and their effects of climate change's effects on birds generally. We work with Boise State's Bird Mountain Observatory, and they have been charting things for 15 years and have found quite an impact, which is really neat. And for the classes that might not know, Ari, forest fragmentation is when you take a big forest and chop it up into lots of little pieces.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Perfect. Let's go to Cape Henry Collegiate. So you guys just need to demute your own mic, and then you will be good to go for a question. And I'll let you know when you're good.
Okay.
Perfect. There you go. So yeah, just come on up and.
Have you ever found a new species of birds?
Oh gosh, what a great question. I would love to, but I have not. I have not found a new species. I have not we call it describing a new species, and we have not described a new species of bird at our site. There was one maybe 5 or 6 years back that was described pretty close to where we are, but as of now, no, we haven't described any new species. However, a lot of people, when they're looking at the relationships among species, actually see sometimes that what we called one species across a big region, because there's slight variations, actually might be subspecies, and then they might, or they might divide them up into separate species depending on their calls. So that remains to be seen. But no, I have not. I would love to. It's a great question.
Very cool, and good luck. All right, we had Miss Holden's grade 3s in Spruce Grove, Alberta join us during the call. So guys, just come on up and demute your mic. It's a little microphone symbol at the top of your screen, and you'll be good to go. I'll let you know.
Sorry, there we go.
Yep, there you go.
How many types of birds are there?
In the world, or in the well, in the field site I'm at, there's probably over 500 species in the area that we're working on. The actual plot, it's a great question. And on the plot that we're working on, the plot we're working on is about 100 hectares or about 200 acres. And on that plot, we've registered over 220 species so far within that area. So lots of birds, lots of species. Yeah, great question.
Just to follow up, how many are there in the whole world, though?
About 12,000, I think.
There's 500 in the park? That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's pretty, it's crazy. That's a lot.
Ari, do you have time for 6 more questions? Can we go through each class?
Absolutely.
Let's go to Miss Vischer's class then. If you guys have a question again, come on up.
What's your question?
Did you ever have one of those birds that we can call anything for your voices?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Sorry, did you have the name of the bird? Birds that anything that, like you said, did it ever record any of your voices?
Okay, so that bird that can mimic things, did it ever mimic your voices?
Oh, it's a great question. No, it cannot. It's not like parrots. It actually, those birds have never mimicked voices. No, not to my knowledge. No, but they're incredible. They mimic just about everything else. It's pretty amazing. You'll be in the forest, and literally there'll be 10 to 15 minutes where that bird can mimic probably 40 or 50 species. It's unbelievable. But yeah, it's a great question. No, they don't, but they don't.
It is. That would be really neat, though. A great video for groups on the classes to look up after this. So this isn't the bird that Ari's been talking about, but lyrebird, Lyre birds can do something similar, and they mimic cameras and chainsaws, and it's really cool. Car horn. So I urge you to check that out too. Let's go to Ms. Oster's class. You guys have a second question?
How many times have you went to like the campground, like in Peru?
How many what in the campground?
How many times have you gone to the campground? How many times have you done expeditions out there?
So well, I go pretty much every year. I've been going every year for the last 10 years, maybe. So but the different places, yeah. And so this last one, it was the first time I went to this last one. But before that, on the same national park at a different spot, 4 times. Before that, in northern Peru, maybe 3 times. In Bolivia, which is in the northwestern part of Bolivia, which is also the Amazon. I've been there 3 or 4 times. So once a year, every year, on average. Yeah.
And how long are you actually there? Like each time you go, is it a couple weeks?
So it depends. When I was doing my PhD, I'd be there up to 6 months, but now it's only a month. Yeah, now it's only a month or 2. So it gets less and less because you have to do more and more. So you have to delegate more and more. And so there's people down there still collecting data right now at the site I just showed you. Yeah.
That is a statement that only a field biologist could make. Only a month or 2 out in the field and tents and trucks. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go to Miss Lee's class.
Turn and face the camera.
Louise, face the camera.
Hi, my name is Louise.
Hi, my name's Luis.
Hello.
Who hired you? Like, who paid for your research?
No, that's a really good question. So the money right now there's a couple components to it. So researchers are always looking to different agencies to fund their research, and that's to fund the actual to get us down there and to sample and all that stuff. That's the one component. And then there's the money I get, like for my salary to live off, so I can buy food and pay rent and all that kind of stuff. And that comes from the University of California at Berkeley. I'm on what's called a fellowship. And so right now I'm getting paid by that fellowship. And then once you get a permanent job at a university, then the university pays your salary just like any other working job or any other job. So while you have your salary once you have a fixed salary, that's one thing, but you need to get extra money to do the research. So even though I have a salary, unless I apply for grants, I won't have any money to do research. So you have to apply for grants usually every year to do the money to get down there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. It's really interesting, actually, Ari. So I've done over 100 Hangouts, and it's only been the last 6. For whatever reason, every single Hangout, someone asks about how science gets funded. I don't know what the shift has been, but it's really nice to hear who actually makes it happen.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's go to Miss Williams' class.
Hi, Sophia Martinez would like to know, what is the most challenging bird that you've ever tried to study?
Oh, that's a great question. Now, so I will say this is that we pick birds to study that we think won't provide. A lot of times we pick birds that we think are feasible to study. So the ones that are really difficult we avoid. So for instance, most of the birds that we study, and actually most of the birds that anyone studies in the tropics, are usually birds in the understory because we can watch and observe them. For instance, the birds in the canopy that are like 40 meters high or 40 yards high, those are really hard to study. So apart from knowing that they're there and counting them or hearing when we hear them and registering the books, we really can't do much more with those, right? So the birds that we can study, the most challenging one has been that ant trike. We actually did an experiment where we removed them for 3 days to see what the rest of the birds around them would do when they weren't there. We did this experiment. And so it took us anywhere from 2 to 3 days and 8 nets and anywhere from 3 to 7, 8 people to try and capture the 2 to 4 individuals, the male and the female and their offspring, to remove them and put them in little aviaries for 3 days. So that was definitely the most challenging birds we've had to work with to study. Great question.
Great answer. All right, let's go back to Cape Henry Collegiate. You guys have a second question? Come on up. That was like the fastest hand shooting up I've ever seen.
Did you have to earn an award to go down to Peru?
So this relates to the question about how you get funded. So I had to apply for this last project. I applied for a grant from National Geographic. And so in a way, yes, you kind of have to apply, and it's very competitive. Like not everyone gets funded. And that goes for any kind of funding. So there's different government agencies that provide funding, and all of us as researchers are always applying for these, and the funding rates are very low. So it's very competitive. So yes, it is kind of like an award in terms of you got to really compete and do your best to get a grant. And even if it's really, really good, a lot of times you just don't get it because a lot of people have really, really interesting and exciting and great, really well-designed research projects, but a lot of them don't get funded. That doesn't mean it's not good. It just means for whatever reason, for the fit and for what the agency is looking for, sometimes you get funded and sometimes you don't. So you strike out a lot, but that's part of the process, and it's normal, and everyone goes through it. The best of the best scientists will tell you very few of their projects get funded. And that's you just have to be persistent and patient, and eventually you get funded. You just got to keep going at it.
Outstanding. For the classes, it's worth noting too. So, Ari, you mentioned that there's not that much money in the scheme of things to go around. So, if the budgets of Canada and the U.S. were $100, about $3 of those dollars go towards all the science, all the space, all the biology, all the ocean research. So, it's a very, very small amount compared to everything else. So, it goes a long way and makes things like this possible.
Right.
Right. We've got time for one more question from our class. Let's go back to Miss Holden's group. If you guys have a second question, go right ahead. And there you go.
What's the most thing to do in Peru?
What?
In the rainforest.
I didn't hear the question.
What's the biggest challenge in the rainforest?
What's the biggest challenge in the rainforest?
Yeah.
That is a great question. And honestly, I think the biggest challenge, there's a couple. I think one is like if you need to be there for a long time to collect data, you kind of have to have a lot of you have to prepare yourself physically and mentally for being out there for a long time. It's really great, and you can be really excited the first day or two and running around. But by the second week or the third week, when you're waking up at 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning, you start dragging your feet, and you can kind of start getting a little sloppy in terms of, or sloppy and just tired, and you just kind of have to constantly have vigilance and constantly kind of remind yourself of the importance of having a routine to collect the data, and just to make sure you take care of yourself physically and mentally so that you can last long enough to do it. That goes for any, I think, researcher really. And so that's the biggest challenge. And then apart from the details of whatever specific work you're going to do. Yeah, so that's a great question. Yeah. Did all the classes get a chance to ask questions?
Every class has had 2 actually, which is great.
Okay.
That's standard. So before we wrap up and let the classes get a chance to say thank you, I just want to ask one more question to you, which is for students that might want to become biologists, that might want to study birds, what can they do right now while they're in these early grades to get inspired and end up doing something like you?
Yeah, I think, wow, that's pretty early on. All of you are really, really young. So I think the most important thing is, I think the most important thing is for all of you is to see what gets you excited. And that is really important, okay? So whatever gets you excited in your life, think if that is possible to turn that into a career. And that goes for anything beyond biology and being a field biologist, okay? So if music gets you excited, if you always find yourself playing music at home, maybe you want to think about that, listen to yourself in terms of what drives you and gets you excited about your life, okay? That's a really important lesson, I think. And as far as biology, field biology, it's really great if you want to be out there, and if you find yourself turning rocks over, if you find yourself walking around in your backyard, uncovering, looking for salamanders, listening for birds in the trees constantly, you're out there a lot, then that's great. And that tells you that you really like stuff. I mean, it's great to get excited when you see a documentary or read a book, but really it's if you're out there and you really like to be out there and you don't mind the mosquitoes and you don't mind the heat or the rain, then you really know. Yeah, if you really get excited when you're out there. So things to do, at your age, I think it's just the most important thing to do is to find out what you like. I mean, I can't tell you at 8 years old, get a good grade in biology because you're not there yet, right? So I don't quite know. I've been removed from the school system for a while. But the other thing to think about is always I think this is really important, is science is becoming more and more collaborative, and to realize when you do work, if you really like science and all of you do science projects, if they don't work out right away, it doesn't mean you're not qualified. That is really, really, really important, because I will tell all of you now that as exciting and as wonderful it is, I don't know anyone who hasn't had a million setbacks, and just gazillions of setbacks, and just things don't work out. We forget things. We have great experiments. They don't work. So for every success out there, we have a lot of setbacks. So don't get frustrated if you have a setback when you go out and you do a project in your class and it doesn't work. That doesn't mean you cannot be a scientist. In fact, I was terrible. Just to let you all know, I actually failed my first semester of biology in high school. So And the main thing I want to tell you is that people who are doctors, you know, and in biology, it has a PhD, but really what the P stands for is persistence and patience. And if you have that, if you're patient and persistent and you're willing to observe things, that is the most important thing. And everything else I think can come along. So that is the most important thing, is to prepare yourself to be able to be uncomfortable in the field, to spend time outdoors and looking at things, take notes of things you observe, and realize if something doesn't work, if you can't make it up a trail one time, or you do a chemistry experiment or a physics experiment doesn't work or whatever, doesn't mean you can't do science. Everyone has setbacks. So that's part of the process. Really important.
That is like the best answer I've ever had for that question. So thank you for that. I've done a lot of these. So what we do at the end of every hangout, Ari, is I'm going to demute everyone's mic. So Ms. Fisher's class, Ms. Oster's class, Ms. Lee's class, Ms. Williams, Ms. Holmes' class, Ms. Williams, Ms. Henry. If you guys could join me in saying a huge thank you, Ari, for joining us today. So thank you so much, Ari. Thank you so much, Ari.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks for sharing. You guys have all been great. It's been wonderful sharing.